Welcome back to another episode of the Humans of Developer DAO podcast. In this episode, I chat with Narb. Narb is a software engineer during the day, and at night, he's hacking away at Web3 projects. In this episode, I chat with Narb to learn more about his passion towards technology. Next, we dive in and explore DevNTell to learn more about what it is, as well as what it's grown to be today. And finally, we dive into and explore his project, Glosseta. Glosseta is an open source glossary that is built to onboard and teach more people about this entire space of Web3. Finally, I'd love to give a shout out to our sponsor, DAO. If you are interested to learn more about a decentralized incubator in Web3, please check out the description below. Now, let's dive in. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on another episode of the Humans of Developer DAO podcast. Today, I am so super fortunate to be joined by Narb. So Narb, in this podcast, we love to pass the mic over to you for you to introduce yourself and pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Terja. And awesome to be on. Been waiting to get on one of these for a while. So awesome, the day has finally come. For those of you who don't know, my name is Narb Shanazarian. I go by Narb for short. I'm out of Vancouver, BC, Canada. I'm an engineer of now 7 years professionally. Majority of the time, all the time I've been working out of Expedia out of here in Vancouver as a full stack dev, and recently have kind of switched over to a managerial role just to try that out. But not gonna lie, I miss engineering. I don't know if managerial roles for me, but kind of started in computer science in high school. Took a couple of programming classes there, but like high school program classes aren't really anything to kind of write home about. So the pretty much the extent of it was kind of learning C++ out of a textbook, which is kind of lame. But I mean, it inspired me enough to kind of pursue that in post-secondary studies, where I finished in computer science, and then basically landed a job after that. So very, very classic in terms of like how I got started as a developer. But Web3 is a more interesting story. Web3 years feel kind of like dog years. I think Colin Ford mentioned this somewhere, and it's kind of stuck with me. It's so true. But basically, in 2021, I kind of started looking at Web3 on my own, studying the Bitcoin white paper. Of course, that's kind of how everybody gets started. And then after that, I kind of graduated to the Ethereum eco space, and then started doing some POCs, smart contract building, NFTs, tokens, and then kind of found myself on crypto Twitter. And then I just started following people, and then all of a sudden I saw this tweet by Nader on this thing called Developer DAO, and then kind of from that was actually my first NFT that I ever minted, and then kind of it all went from there. And one of the best decisions of my life, not gonna lie.
Nice. I loved hearing that. It was one thing that I super excited to ask about is you coming from such a technical background of the traditional route of computer science, and now diving into this, like doing both, right? You're doing a lot of Web2 stuff actually with your day job, but you're exploring this like other route, which is like super dope. So I wanted to ask, like, what's been your kind of passion when it comes to like actually wanting to pursue computer science? Because that's something that a lot of developers end up doing in the space in general, of actually pursuing it and then like doing that as a career. So what about technology especially excites you?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it kind of started at an early age for me. Like when I was young, I was very fortunate to be able to have access to like a lot of the highest end like computers and stuff, and be able to play games and all that. And it was really into Lego as well. So that whole like building kind of philosophy kind of came out of there. So like when I were to get a Lego set, I'd build it through the instructions, but then I like break it apart and kind of build my own thing from that. And I think kind of that manifested itself as I kept growing. And like it was like I said, in high school when I started doing the like programming courses, that kind of piqued my interest. I'm like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. And back then the bar to kind of get into a computer science program at school was like, you had to basically have like a 80 average. But now I think it's like high 90s, if I'm not mistaken. But then kind of what cemented it for me was a software engineering class I took in university, where it was like that was the most popular class to take in the program, where basically the whole class was to make an iPhone app. The prof gave like a subject. It was like that the subject that particular year was accessibility.
Mhm.
So they're like, okay, here's a topic, pick something in this topic and create an iPhone or iPad app. And back then, I think, yeah, back then it was right when the second or third gen iPad kind of came out, and like people were really hype on that. And I was fortunate to have bought one. And basically, what we ended up building was a app that helped a red green colorblind person kind of distinguish those two colors. But long story short, we built that app, and one of our group members actually had a friend that was red green colorblind. So to test, we actually gave this person the app, and he was like, he went into a grocery store, and he was like, "Holy shit! I can finally tell like a green pepper from a red pepper apart." And then it's kind of that thing that experience has stuck with me like ever since, and like really kind of cemented the fact that shit, I can build things that kind of make a difference for people. And I really love like going through that. Like my favorite part is like starting a project and kind of seeing its progress as it goes. But like many other people, I have so many in like the black book to do,
Nice.
but only so much time to do well.
No, that's actually really awesome. The fact that you had that like one pivotal moment that like really stuck with you,
Yeah,
and then you probably like refer back to that moment of like you can actually build. I,
exactly.
I had that feeling recently of like, oh shit, like I can build stuff, and I've been doing
Yeah,
a variety of different projects now, like where it's not just Web3, but I can do
yeah,
other stuff of like playing with like GPT-3 because it's like
yeah,
so much fun.
yeah, yeah.
That's really good. No, that's awesome to hear your story of that.
Yeah, man.
Um, yeah, yeah, sorry, go
There's
ahead.
so yeah. It's like I was just gonna say it's just like a everlasting journey. It's like you're never like done. You're always learning something. And yeah, as we keep going here, it's gonna be more and more cool tech to play with, but not enough time. As we all
Yeah,
know,
I know.
right?
And
Yeah,
are you enjoying what you're doing right now as a career of like actually, you said you're working at Expedia, so have you been enjoying what you're doing? And especially now with this like managerial role?
yeah, yeah, 100%. Like basically, you can think of at least how I think of things is like an engineering role is an engineering role. It's just the domain that you work in is different between all the jobs. So in this particular role as an engineer, I've been very fortunate to be able to play with a lot of different technologies, launch meaningful applications and software that kind of impacts a lot of people. And like travel, working in travel is very interesting. It's not something that I would have thought I'd enter, but I've been enjoying it quite a bit. And like we all know, Web3 and travel kind of go together, right? It's like everyone, the best experiences that we all enjoy together in Web3 is like traveling from conference to conference and enjoying each other's company in real life. So kind of that kind of thing kind of cemented the fact that I enjoy what I do, and looking forward to the next couple of years here.
No, yeah, that must be awesome. Like, especially as you're getting the chance to travel and you get to look at your phone or whatever, like,
Yeah,
whatever team you're working on, especially the product,
yeah,
and be like, hey, I made that. Like, I made it. It's possible because of me, right? Like, that's a pretty
exactly.
cool
Yeah,
feeling. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
so like now, like doing all the stuff that you're doing with, your day job and like you're preoccupied with all that. I'd love to kind of dive into how you spend all the nights and weekends and spending time
Yeah,
in Developer DAO and like doing all these different things. So can you tell us a little bit more about DevNTell and all the work you've been doing for that?
100%. So kind of starting on how I manage time between all of these things. So it's very, very important to kind of make a schedule and kind of stick by that. So of course, day job is day job. But like after that, I basically try to carve out at least like an hour for like developer DAO stuff, whether that's responding to emails, trying to set up a DevNTell, prepping for DevNTell, participating in like budget steward stuff, initiative lead stuff. Um, and then basically after that, well, this is in the evening hours. So like right after work, I go work out for about an hour. It's like I can't like not do that. If I don't do that, I'll go crazy.
Nice, nice.
Um, but yeah, like after work, I'm either watching a hockey game and or working, or like doing developer DAO stuff, like I said. But the majority of my time, nights and weekends, have been working on this side hustle of mine called Glosseta, and kind of looking to expand that. Well, we can talk about that a little later. But one of the coolest things that I've done in Developer DAO, as you mentioned, is DevNTell. So if folks don't know what DevNTell is basically a 30-minute window for people in the DAO to present basically all the cool shit they've been working on, no matter how small or big, on Fridays, typically around the 8 to 9 PST hours. And it started kind of in a weird way. Basically, it was back then when it started, the notion of guilds in the DAO kind of just started going. And in the dev guild, we're trying to think of things to kind of expand what we do. And then one of the ideas there was like, what if we do like a show and tell? And then I was like, okay, we can call it DevNTell. And then Withart back then, he basically said, yeah, let's do it. Withart is an awesome human being. Definitely you should follow him on Twitter. But yeah, he basically encouraged me to kind of be the first one to go on there. I'm like, okay, why not? It's like, I proposed it, why not be the first to set an example? And that's actually where I first introduced Glosseta. But after that, it kind of just took off in a sense where for the first, I'd say like month and a half, it was a lot of me just chasing people to kind of come on. But then after some point, maybe like 2 months or something into it, it just started like people just started self-booking. And it was nuts. It just went like 1 month started to fill out, 2 months started to fill out, 3 months started to fill out. It was like August, and like almost the whole year was filled out. We actually ended up booking the whole year in September, which is like nuts. And we're actually booked up to I think mid-February for 23. But essentially the whole purpose behind that was to give a platform for people to be able to kind of show all the cool things they're working on. Because as far as I could see, the main place people got a lot of attention was on social media. And for a lot of people, like either they don't have access to social media or they don't have a lot of followers to be able to share that. And we know Web3 is a very small community, it's very close knit. So I thought, what better place than a DAO for developers, and not just developing, anyone that can come on DevNTell, but basically people to show all the hard work they've been grinding away at, whether it's like something you built in build space or like a new startup or something you built up. It's just very fulfilling to see like people come on and show their passion about like what they built. And some of these products and apps that come on DevNTell are actually they kind of take off, whether or not it's that DevNTell magic, but they end up taking off and becoming like meaningful products, whether immediately or like down the line. So it's very, very awesome to see. And it's kind of become my niche thing in the DAO. Whether or not I do it forever, I don't know. But I hope it's something that just like lasts as a staple going forward.
No, it's awesome to see that because you do so much in the DAO. That's one thing that needs to be said. But one of the particular things was DevNTell and the fact that it started off just being such a really fun thing and getting people to like you said, like foster that community of builders, of being able to showcase the projects you're building. And I definitely did notice that like there are projects that, that are from like build space, and there are projects that people spend like their entire weekends on every like weekend and showing off. But then you have those projects that like people have been working on and then it takes off, ends up like I've seen companies that have actually raised or like things like that, all these different things. Come back to Developer DAO because they started to notice that like Developer DAO is also one of the best communities of actually finding developers, and where you're like when we have people like you that are actually wanting to showcase and like support developers, which is like the best part about it.
100%. It's basically adult show and tell, right? Who doesn't want to do that?
Exactly. Has there been like a particular project that like you really loved? I know it's a tough question, and you can also talk about your project too, because we got to talk about Glosseta because you definitely been working on it for a while now. So
100%. It's tough to pinpoint one. I really do find a lot of the folks that come on very interesting. Today, for example, we had Patrick Skinner come on, who has like a really interesting background story, and he's trying to fight against all the counterfeiting that kind of goes on in like real world products and NFTs and stuff. And then we have like big protocols that come on, like whether it's the Graph Network or Ceramic, that kind of show all the cool things they're working on. So it's hard to pinpoint on like one particular thing. I really enjoy like seeing everything, whether it's in just like beta phase or not even launched, or like a cemented product. I can't pick just one.
No, that's really fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. And one thing I guess we can like also jump into, if anyone is still interested in to, present their projects. You said like the schedule is very mixed up, or like are booked up already. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, for sure. So the process to book is through a Notion wiki. So if you go to the DevNTell channel itself in the Discord, there is a pinned link to the Notion wiki. But if not, we can share it. I can share it again in that channel. But essentially what you do, it's all self-managed. You basically go to the bottom of that page, and there's a calendar with basically opened and closed slots. So if there's no one's name next to a particular date, then it's up for grabs. So right now, I believe we have a couple of Fridays left in February and all of March. And then basically I just keep adding on to that as as it fills out.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. That at least
Yeah.
the one other thing to note is that you're like giving up your like your time, which is so valuable. But you're getting a chance to like, showcase these projects. So like kudos on you for, obviously you have so many awesome people kind of, jumping in, but you're taking your time to kind of actually create this chance for people to do this. So that's really, we're really fortunate to have you for that. Just want to mention
Thank you
that.
so much, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man. It really means a lot.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
And yeah, we got to talk about Glosseta. Like, can you tell us a little bit why you even started the
Yes.
project, and tell us a little bit
Yeah.
more?
100%. So, so I guess a precursor to this. Prior to joining Developer DAO, I'd never actually done anything in open source. It's always been something I wanted to do, but like kept going down the list of priorities and procrastination, blah blah blah. So when I actually first joined the DAO, I just got involved with the website, and that's because like that was the only thing kind of happening at that time. This was like October 2021. It was like maybe a month after the DAO itself had come about. But basically through that, with Heart again, gave me the opportunity to become a maintainer on that repo, and it gave me a really interesting kind of lens on how open source works. I mean, I don't know how it works. Like, I mean, I've only been participating in open source for about a year, actively anyhow. So still learning, but it really inspired me in all like the work people were doing in the DAO, all the things that kind of came after that website to kind of start my own project. And coupled with that, when I particularly started learning Web3, especially from like Web3 crypto Twitter, sorry, I saw a lot of different acronyms and terms kind of being thrown out there, and I didn't really know what most of them meant. So GM, for example, when I first started, I thought people were pumping like General Motors tire. Why is General Motors so hot? Like what's going on? And then later on, I went, oh, it means like good morning. So I'm like, okay, so there's an opportunity here to kind of help newcomers in the space kind of learn the lingo and terminology, and that kind of pushed me to create Glosseta. So Glosseta in its current form is a Web3 glossary, but what sets it apart from the other glossaries out there is that all of its content is stored and served from the Arweave storage protocol. So it was kind of two birds with one stone. Really wanted to learn Arweave, and I wanted to kind of solve this problem that I saw. So kind of put both things together, and like after a month and a half, the first MVP was kind of launched. And anybody today, if you're looking for an easy way to kind of get your feet wet with Web3, solve an easy issue, basically predominantly a lot of issues on the repo. So GitHub/Glosseta are basically terms that either come up through Twitter, people requesting, or I put out. to be researched, and your job is to come up with a 2 to 3 sentence kind of description on that topic. So, for example, it could be like the Ethereum virtual machine, or like what a ZK proof is, for example. And basically, it's kind of like a mini research project where you take maybe like an evening or maybe a weekend or something to research that on your own, come up with a description, and then I take care of basically uploading that to Arweave. So if anybody's out there wants to get their feet wet with open source development and Web3, it's a great place to start. And then after that, I started kind of thinking about, okay, so this is a glossary, but when I start to share this with my friends and family, there's still that like eyebrow raise, like, oh, what's Web3, right? So I started to kind of think about how to expand this and kind of make it more accessible to everybody. So a big thing today, especially for non-technical people entering the space, is they think Web3 and like cryptocurrency speculation are one and the same. And we all know, those of us in the space know that's not the case. I mean, we had quite a chaotic week this week with FTX and BlockFi now, but it's much more than that. I see Web3 as like a big umbrella of really cool, innovative technology. And there's a lot more to it than just like crypto pump and dumps, even though those are the things that kind of get the headlines. So it's unfortunate because that's what a lot of mainstream media and like celebrities and social media kind of focuses on. And a lot of the time it comes from people who don't really know what they're talking about. So that kind of inspired me to make a nonprofit. So I opened the not-for-profit called the Glosseta Foundation, whose mission is to kind of push forward digestible open Web3 information to the non-technical crowd. So a lot of the time, like today, a lot of the documentation on Web3 is geared towards a developer crowd, and it makes sense because we need developers to build the cool shit that people are going to use. But the issue is that a lot of the time, the content that's out there is way overly technical, or like sometimes what I've noticed is like the protocols themselves or the apps, they have a hard time explaining their own product to like a non-technical person. So kind of out of that came to be this foundation that I started. That's kind of hinged on 3 pillars. So one is like educational content. So I want to expand Glosseta to become more than just a glossary. I want it to become like an educational platform that anybody can access for free to learn Web3, focusing on the non-technical people. And then there's also a pillar on content. So stay tuned for December 2nd in DevNTell to see what's called the Glosseta API. But basically you can think of that as a abstraction around the centralized storage protocols that we have today, but making that accessible in a Web 2 fashion. And then also some ideas around content moderation protocols. And finally, the last pillar in that is kind of community. So in order to be able to create all that educational content, I need the buy-in from the large Web3 crowd, because who knows Web3 better than the Web3 folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of where my passions and my passions kind of lie in, like the after work weekends, kind of pushing that forward and building that out. And a disclaimer, I'm basically the only person kind of working on this, so it's taking up a lot of my time. So if you want to help out, like check out github.com/Glosseta to get your hands wet.
Sweet, dude. That was awesome. You just dropped so many bombs, because I had like, at first I was like, I'm gonna ask you about, open source and like doing private coding and all these different questions, but now I'm shifting the entire conversation back to like Glosseta and like this foundation that you're trying to think like create essentially, right? Can I ask, you mentioned like having conversations with a lot of like non-technical people. Can I ask like how that really sprouted this this entire project and idea? Like was and like bringing it back to that.
Yeah, for sure. So we all know the meme, like your mom thinks you work at Bitcoin or whatever. And it basically, for me at this point, a lot of the time when I'm talking to Web2 folks, like whether they're technical or non-technical, trying to explain Web3, it's in a very defensive kind of manner. They always bring up the fact that, oh yeah, like you see this token kind of bombed, or like, what do you think like Bitcoin's price is going to be after that? I'm like, there's more to this than just like price speculation, right? And kind of grew out of this tiredness of like continuously having to like defend myself and like the Web3 community on like what we're doing, and um, and trying to dispel basically the mistruths that are out there. So my drive here is basically to explain Web3 like fact for fact, like what it is versus what it isn't. And like even where I work, like where I try to kind of explain this topic to either like teammates or like to a broader community, there's always some sort of backlash. And a lot of the times it has to do with people's preconceived biases towards this based on their main news and media sources, right? So a lot of
Mhm.
people use like CNBC or like whatever other like news channel to kind of gate their information on the space, and that's, or like even YouTube influencers who are like just trying to pump a token for their own game, probably, right? So I think we can do much better than that, and this is kind of why it drove me to create this foundation to kind of at least take my kick at the can to help people kind of onboard in the space. Like even when you go to like a bank, or like just try to explain your business to like somebody, they're like, oh, I don't even know what Web3 is. So
Yeah.
there's a big opportunity there to kind of educate people. Like we don't have to get into the nitty gritty technicals of all the things, but just like explaining like what it is, why we're doing it, what's wrong with today's Web2 world where platforms hold all your data,
Mhm.
and why transitioning to this new state of affairs, let's say, is a better or preconceived better way of doing things, and what it enables you to have a greater control of. So um, I don't think so. Getting on this topic of like Web 2 to Web 3, I don't think we get to Web 3 fully, like right away. Web 3 is very ambitious, but I think it starts out with we kind of getting to this Web 2.5 kind of stage where
Yeah.
we basically look to abstract away a lot of the Web 3 from the user, and kind of make them not realize they're using Web 2. And then from that, at least I believe, we'll start to get a mass kind of adoption of the technology. And then as that kind of progresses, I think people will start to realize like, oh, like why am I hosting my site on a centralized server when I can host my site forever, so to speak, on something like Arweave or IPFS, right? Now, there are some limiting constraints in that there's nothing really out there, or like, for example, like load balancing, like a lot of these solutions don't have load balancing, where you would kind of get that from a centralized solution. And there's nothing really established out there for like launching a backend service in a decentralized way. I think it's just starting to kind of get off the ground now, but until there can be kind of like a parallel between how apps are launched and monitored and load balanced today in Web 3, I don't know if we kind of can get fully to Web 3, if that makes sense. We kind of
Yeah.
stick in this Web 2.5 kind of thing until all of the other necessary bits kind of come out.
Yeah, no,
I
I
realize
think
that's quite a ramble.
you, yeah, no, you touched on a couple of different things. Like I really wanted to just hit home on that.
Yeah.
Like one was definitely the kind of the issues that we've seen like this past week, for example, with like
Yeah.
FTX and BlockFi, like all these different things that are happening. It just portrays like a really bad image into the
Yeah.
space. But then when you, for example, we're like talking about Glosseta and like um all the different things that you're building out, it just kind of solidified my personal like thoughts of like there's still a lot of good and like from the technical side that is happening beyond the noise, because that's
Yeah.
more like finance and all these different issues that are happening with people that are not too aware of the technology behind it.
Yeah.
And so from like a very nerdy perspective, I'm still like, okay, there's still cool stuff
Yeah.
happening. And then the second thing was just like definitely the Web 2.5. I'm just really curious to see the migration of all these different companies in the
Yeah.
industry right now that we have actually start to invest into crypto and Web 3,
Yeah.
but like more so their tech, because like you said,
Yeah.
I also think of, you know, the moment where like Web3 is actually going to be useful is like when my mom can use it, but she
Yeah.
doesn't know how to use it, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I were to ask her like, how does Google work? She probably won't know.
Yeah. But
First,
she
like,
knows like
yeah.
at a high level, like you go to Google to like search a thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
like in the background, if Web3 tech is like being able to be involved, is like
Yeah.
that's when you know then there's actually going to be adoption. But anyways, it's just going to take a couple more years of like having to kind of go through
Oh
this.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, like it's such a cool conversation to have because of all
Yeah.
the noise that just went by. But there's still like positive movement going on. Is just like the
Yeah.
reassurance that we need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And on that topic of like companies kind of adopting the tech, the key point will be like one, education, of course, but the other thing is to like convince people that using these new building blocks are an improvement over like the traditional tech stack we've been accustomed to. Like, for example, databases. Like, I love databases. I'm a backend engineer for. I say I'm a full stack, but I do like backend. Backend is my favorite, but I still see a place for databases, like in this Web 2.5 kind of world. But the the key to kind of drive home, at least with some of this tech, is like how it's going to improve like either your bottom line, your monthly costs. For example, like there are companies out there that are paying like $1 million a day for like AWS services. So for as a parallel to this world, like if we consider like smart contracts as like a new like application layer, you basically deploy. The new model is like you deploy once and it's there forever, and that model is basically you pay once to kind of have that deployed, and you
Yeah.
have this big load balancing kind of network that is the blockchain network itself, that kind of helps you keep things afloat. Of course, there can be layers that get built on top of that. For example,
Mhm.
like the Graph Protocol builds their
Yeah.
indexing layer on it, right, to help with content consumption. But in my opinion, it's like having that concrete proof of like, hey, this thing is much well, I don't know, much better, but it's a better solution to how we're doing things today, and kind of driving that home. So if anybody's trying to get Web3 to become a thing in their company, wherever they work, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point too. I think there's so much innovation that still needs to take place in this whole space that
Yeah,
we're still far, but there's really good, like cool different things that are happening. And I would say like
yeah,
you for your like are probably one of the most knowledgeable person about that in this kind of space of like having to see all these different dev and tell projects, especially in the
yeah,
Web3 space, where like you get to see builders that are spending their like nights and week like Friday nights and
yeah,
weekends. And that's how you know people actually
yeah,
care.
yeah.
uh,
Exactly,
and they're
exactly.
like building all these different things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That's one of the that's one of like the nice kind of, let's call it, side effects of DevNTell. Is like it's basically becoming like a networking kind of thing, and like you said, it's very interesting and enlightening to see people like show off all the cool stuff they're kind of grinding away at like after hours. And
Yeah.
these are the people that, like you mentioned, are like the hardcore Web3 folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I'd love to ask too, kind of having, we've talked about like your career. We talked about like all the stuff you're doing with like your side passions and your
yeah,
side hustles and your passions
yeah,
of like, building. What do you do outside of all these different things? Because clearly you're very
yeah,
preoccupied. You talked about the gym. I want to
yeah,
bug you about like when you're not just working so much in the head of like
yeah.
different things. What are you up to?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I'm very passionate about like health. So whether that's like nutrition or like fitness. So I started working out when I was 13, I believe. So just got a couple of weights from family, and then just started doing like a really simple routine. And then it kind of became a habit, and then it's kind of stuck with me like ever since. So a lot of the time, at least now, like anything like non tech related, you can either find me at the gym or like taking in a hockey game or something like that. I'm a hockey nerd, really into really into hockey. So I participate in like fantasy hockey and all that. Um, so I I try to get away from all the tech stuff and Web3 stuff
Yeah.
as best I can with those outlets. I enjoy reading quite a bit. I'm really into like medieval like fantasy stuff. So like Lord of the Rings. So as you see
Yeah.
my background, I'm in Mordor, uh, and Game of
Have you
Thrones.
watched the so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
okay, so I haven't watched Lord of the Rings, so that's my
Okay.
like that's my thing. But
Oh,
I
treasure.
know I've heard a lot of good things. Have you watched the new episode or the show of Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
House of
The
Dragons? Yeah. That's
yeah.
just exactly what it reminded me of. So I was like, maybe it's that. Clearly
Yeah.
not, but yeah.
Yeah, so I'd recommend if you want to start with Lord of the Rings, like at least watch the first one, Fellowship of the Ring. That's the
Okay.
one that's most mentioned and spoken about, like memes or forums or like just chit chat.
Yeah.
And then all the other ones you are worth watching. So I have this yearly ritual where like around Christmas time, I watch like all the extended editions like when I'm off. So
Nice.
so
Okay, so
that's like
here
yeah,
I'll say
yeah.
I'll spend my Christmas doing that. Like my holiday breaks, I will go through every single all the movies. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So just be warned, the extended editions, if you watch all of them, that's about like half a day, like literally like half a day's worth. So
That's fine.
yes. The Hobbit you can skip. I don't know, I might get some like flame for that. But the films were like meh to me at least. And then the books are awesome too. If you have time to read the books, like go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Dope. Dope. Is there any particular like what's your favorite movie, by the way? Like particular movie
So
that you really enjoy? Yeah.
so top three, I'd say favorite of all time is a tie between Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, and The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. And
Mm.
then third, um, so I'm also quite the Batman nerd. So I one of my favorite Batman movies of all time is like the real life adaptation of him in The Dark Knight,
Mm.
the one with like Heath Ledger and Christian Bale, and then the cartoon movie, the Ninth of the Phantasma, was like one of the most dopest like animated movies of all time, in my opinion. Um, so those are top three. There's more, but it's hard to get in
Yeah.
a lot of viewing time these days with
No, that's
all
fair.
the
And
set stuff.
then
Yeah,
the last question, because you kept talking about, you're a big hockey fan. I know the
yeah.
Canucks are probably never going to win a ring anytime soon,
Oof, oof.
right? Uh, I said
Yeah,
ring, but the cup. I'm a big
yeah.
basketball fan, but I do know
Gotcha.
the rivalry
Yeah,
between like Toronto, and Vancouver is there, Calgary is well. I mean,
yeah,
so I'd love to ask who are your top like players?
yeah. So I'm a bit of a huge fan of the mid 2011 team. So it's kind of so I grew up so I started watching hockey in like 2003. So
Mhm.
that was the era of the Canucks where they had like Todd Bertuzzi, Marcus Naslund, Dan Cloutier, Matthias Owen, all those guys kind of playing. So started out with them, but then if you don't know, we also had back then a set of twins, Daniel and Henrik Sedin. So these guys were identical twins, and basically they had like super twin power. So they know where each other are at all times. So you see these guys doing like crazy passes, not looking at each other, and just like dummying guys with like dekes and whatnot. And then they really start to dominate in the late or the mid or the yeah the late 2000s, early 2000 teens. And my favorite team of all time is the 2011 team that went to the Stanley Cup final. So yeah, guys like Kevin Bieksa, Roberto Luongo, the Sedins, so on and so forth. So that team kind of sticks out with me, and a lot of my faves kind of come from that. But top teams, I'm more of like a general hockey fan. I do root for the Canucks first, but I'm also a fan of the Montreal Canadiens and New York Islanders. And I can watch like literally any game. I quite enjoy the sport quite a bit. I was never the best ice skater, so never really got into that. But I did street hockey quite a bit in my high school years. So
No, that's awesome. I mean, hey,
yeah.
like you never know. There's always time to improve. I am the worst
Hmm.
skater as well. Like
Yeah.
you
Oh
can
yeah.
never
Yeah.
see, you'll never see me on
Yeah.
on the skates because I suck.
Yeah.
But
Same.
yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
hopefully we get to see that kind of rivalry and maybe we'll go to a game together. That'd be really fun because we're like
Yeah.
a couple hours away. It's not even that far.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Love it.
But yeah, it was super awesome to have you on this podcast. Thank you so much for telling your story and spending like just like couple minutes or a couple like just an hour chatting with me and like having more people to learn more about who Narb is and like all the different things you're working on.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, man. Love what you're doing. Please keep it up. And yeah, this was a fantastic experience. I wouldn't recommend enough to anybody else who's looking to get on here.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.
See you again. Peace.
For giving this episode a listen. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or perhaps you're interested to be on the next episode to share your story. Until next time, I'll see you there.